Rainbow Six Siege over the last 9 years has seen some rather annoying operators and metas to go against, and throughout those years Ubisoft has tried their best to eliminate as many of them as possible. However, one of those operators managed to slip through the cracks for years, staying on top of the pick rate charts while wreaking havoc on the attacking side. So in today's video, I'll be going back in Siege's history and showing you what led to the release of Siege's most annoying operator of all time. Hopefully you all enjoy. For today's story, we must begin by going back to Operation Steel Wave, which was released roughly 4 years ago. And despite this season's sheer amount of content and its success on paper, Steel Wave would become another one of Siege's most controversial operations. One of the reasons for this is the map this patch brought. It was just a rework to House that many people considered to be a worse version than the original. All the rework did was ruin the fun people had with this map in custom games of doing things like Garage Wars, while still not making the map competitive enough to be played at a professional level. On top of that, the operators that Steel Wave added were completely game-changing, but in a bad way. Ace, the attacker, was a hard breacher that completely replaced the role of Thermite and who broke through the balancing metrics Ubisoft had been using for years. His ability to open walls from distance made him a safer option, and since Ace had 3 Selmas, he could open more holes in a wall than Thermite, even though they might have been slightly smaller. Additionally, Ace had access to one of the best assault rifles in the game, the AK-12, allowing him to pick up frags for the team at a higher rate than his hard breaching competition, or even better than some fragging operators could. However, the other operator that came with this season would be even more annoying to go against and broken than Ace ever was. This operator being none other than Melusi. Upon release, she would immediately become an operator that was picked nearly every round on the defense, and that was because of her insane gadget, the Banshee. This was an incredibly strong trap that would stop any attacker dead in their tracks. When an attacker entered the range of these traps, their screens would shake tremendously, which made it hard to aim, a loud audio cue would play revealing their position to the defense, and their movement would be slowed significantly. This would be annoying for sure, but what made her Banshee so annoying was the fact that they were only countered by explosives or a melee. And since the game was still in the utility meta at the time, she made the attack's job a living nightmare. Melusi's gadget was arguably the best in the game. They had no real downsides and pretty much did everything you could possibly ask for from a defender. On top of this, she launched with the T5 SMG and the RG15 pistol, which was a strong loadout for picking up some kills, and she was a 3-speed in addition to everything else. Melusi really was the perfect package for a meta with a huge reliance on utility, and she would continue to be a centerpiece of the meta for a very long time, being a huge annoyance to nearly every attacker that found themselves on the other end. However, immediately after she was released, Ubisoft began to realize that she was going to be a problem. So, in an attempt to curb the insane strength of Melusi, Ubisoft would immediately nerf her in the mid-season patch of Steel Wave. In this nerf, they would lower the penalty zone of her Banshees by 33%, they reduced the max penalty range from 6 meters to 4 meters, they reduced the critical range from 3 meters to 2 meters, and they lowered the sound of the Banshee's effects in the first-person point of view. Basically, this made the Banshee's ability to slow attackers much less effective, and it obviously reduced the obnoxious noise the gadget made when you found yourself inside of one. However, since they were still bulletproof, the attackers still had to use a ton of utility to counter her, which wasn't really an option in the meta of the era. Luckily for the attack though, Ubisoft would take another huge shot at nerfing Melusi in the next season, Year 5 Season 3, also known as Operation Shadow Legacy. Operation Shadow Legacy would be released on September 6th, 2020. However, the new content it provided was vastly different from any season we had seen before, and that's in a good way. Instead of bringing 2 new operators, the season brought 1 licensed operator in the form of Zero from Ubisoft's Splinter Cell series, and to make up for the lack of 2 operators, a ton of changes and other forms of content came along with the season. Some examples of this include the variety of new weapon sights like the 2X, 3X, and the 1.5, the addition of the secondary hard breach gadget, the new Ping 2.0, the removal of Vote to Kick, Thatcher's rework, the Tachanka rework, the introduction of map bans to ranked, and much more. The sheer amount of changes in Shadow Legacy was amazing. It really was unlike anything we had seen, and it was praised by fans. Many consider this to be the best update in Siege history, and I can't really blame them. In this amazing update was a nerf to Melusi, which we're here to talk about today. And just like the rest of the season's changes, this nerf would be unlike anything we had seen before from the Ubisoft balancing team. That's because Ubisoft would decide to swap Melusi's main primary option with Oryx, meaning that she lost the T5 SMG and got access to the MP5 in return. This was the first and only time Ubisoft would do this as a method of balancing, but it would be quite effective at nerfing Melusi and buffing Oryx all in one go, with both of them definitely needing it. However, Melusi was still incredibly strong, and an annoyance to deal with due to her Banshee still being bulletproof and having strong effects. But unlike most stories I've told before, in this one Ubisoft was on top of their game, and 6 months after this update they would nerf Melusi once again in the Year 6 Season 2 update, also known as Operation North Star, to hopefully make her less annoying to go against. Operation North Star was released on June 14th, 2021, and this season would be pretty controversial. Thunderbird was the new operator edition brought in North Star. She was a healer that used her Kona station stations as stationary healing stations where her and her teammates could go to get some fast heals. As you know, if you've watched my videos, healing in Siege is somewhat of a sticky subject. Due to one-shot headshots being a thing, players are unable to guarantee getting use out of their healing utility. This includes Thunderbird's Kona station. Anytime you get into a gunfight, there is a high likelihood that either you die instantly or your opponent does. So a stationary healing device that you have to truck halfway across the map to get to isn't worth it in majority of situations. Due to this, Thunderbird, at least on PC, never really got any major playtime competitively, and her pick rate would never rise to any substantial height. However, the balancing changes in this patch, which is what we are here for today, were an overall negative for the game, resulting in arguably the worst Siege meta we've ever gotten. In this season, Ubisoft decided to add the Shattered Glass mechanic, they nerfed Zophia's M762 recoil significantly, Smoke's canisters were reworked to be more consistent, Ashe lost one of her breaching rounds, Chachanka got a huge buff to his Shumika launcher, and he got a deployable shield added to his loadout, and finally, Alibi got her 1.5 added in this patch. These changes would have huge negative ramifications for the game at large, because they would directly result in the beginnings of the LMG and the 1.5 meta, some of the most aggressive metas we've ever seen. However, there was one balancing change that pretty much everyone agreed was a net positive, and that was the rework to Melusi's gadget functionality. After this update, Melusi's gadgets, after an attacker set them off, would no longer be bulletproof, allowing for an attacker to take them out without having to waste explosive utility. This change immediately made Melusi feel far more fair to go against, and it was a step in the right direction. However, her pick rate and win rate was still rather high, higher than what the Ubisoft balancing team were looking for. So over the next few seasons, they would make minor changes to her, like removing her nitro cell, but the final nail in the coffin for her that would finally remove her from the conversation as Siege's most annoying operator would come with the release of Year 7 Season 1, also known as Operation Demon Veil. Operation Demon Veil released on March 15th, 2022. This season saw the introduction of Azami as the operator, Emerald Plains as a new map, which was the first time a new map was released in a very long time, and a decent amount of balancing changes. The map would be an extremely controversial piece of content amongst the community, resulting in it being banned quite often, which I'm sure most of you will not be surprised by. As for Azami, she was praised by everyone who laid their hands on the season due to her gadget being so unique and impactful, which was definitely not the norm around this time. Her gadget, if you don't know, is a device called the Kiba, which is a throwing knife that upon impact with a surface will expand into a large bulletproof concrete circle. This allows Azami to provide additional cover to her team and to waste the attacker's explosive utility all at once. Obviously, this had a profound effect on the meta, especially in professional play once she made her way into that sphere. But that wasn't all. The operator balancing decisions also changed things up, and arguably for the better in many people's eyes. Firstly, Ubisoft removed the ability for defenders to deploy cameras outside. Secondly, Bandit was given the ability to attach multiple batteries to a single wall. Gridlock was given an extra track stinger. Ying was given 4 Candelas again, and her flash duration was reduced. And finally, Goyo got a gadget rework that made his canisters independent of a shield. But on top of all of these amazing changes, Melusi was also nerfed again, with her Banshees getting a sizable nerf to the amount of time it takes for them to open. This made her gadget even easier to counter, and it officially removed the annoying label that had become synonymous with Melusi up until this point. However, even though her gadget was objectively worse than it was on launch, her pick rate was still insanely high after this nerf, likely due to her still having decent weapons, her 3-speed rating, and her gadget still being pretty solid even after the nerfs. But the following change that came with the release of Year 7 Season 4 would kill her pick rate for seasons to come, and it would shape her into the utility-focused operator she is today. Operation Solar Raid released on November 21st, and this is a season we find ourselves coming to a lot in these videos, and that's for good reason. It single-handedly changed the trajectory of Siege forever. This season's operator would be none other than Solace, likely the most influential and effective operator in the meta of that era. The reason she was so strong was her unmatched ability to gather intel on the enemy team with the click of a button, which allowed her to pull off plays that no one else could. This opened up so many possibilities that weren't remotely possible before, and it made the defense's roam game 10 times better in an instant. This, combined with the addition of Rank 2.0, had disastrous effects on the meta. After the addition of this system, ranks didn't mean as much due to them no longer being a matchmaking tool, and ranked kind of turned into a battle pass of sorts, where the more you play, the higher rank you could achieve. Also, the fact that losing games had little effect on your RP meant that many players didn't care about losing whatsoever, causing pretty much the entire ranked player base to play extremely aggressively since there was little risk involved. When talking about balancing, this season did a lot as well, but one of the main things was making a ton of operators 3 armors, including operators like Sophia, Mute, Sledge, Osa, and Melusi, the topic of today's video. This would have huge effects on pretty much all of them, but in Melusi's case specifically, her pick rate would immediately tank after this update, making her go from consistently being in the top 5 on defense to being below average overnight. It's honestly one of the most dramatic falls I've ever seen. seen, especially considering how insignificant this change seems on paper. But with her gadget getting nerfed repeatedly, her secondary gadgets getting swapped out, and even her weapons being swapped, I guess this day was pretty much guaranteed to come at some point. However, with the recent mid-season patch that came to the game with the release of the Year 9 Season 2 content update, Melusi would once again shift and start seeing an increase in her pick rate, because she would become an absolute utility powerhouse. Operation New Blood released on June 11th, 2024, as many of you know, and it was one of the worst received seasons ever released. The recruit rework wasn't even really a rework, there wasn't a new map, the spectating update was objectively worse than the original, not to mention they forced a membership onto fans, trying to milk them for as much money as possible. The only thing good that came out of this season was the balancing changes, like the Solace nerf, Finra nerf, and the barbed wire rework, which were all well received. Another well received change in this patch was the changes to Melusi. Melusi was given an additional Banshee, which allowed her to cover a much larger area, and she received a secondary shotgun to help her set up the site for her team. This had instantly revived Melusi and made her an operator actually worth running in the higher ranks. You do sacrifice some gunfight strength to play her, but what you are providing to the team in return is definitely worth it. And best of all, she feels fair to go against with plenty of counters. I think Melusi is in one of the best states she has ever been in, and she is a prime example of how Ubisoft should handle balancing for operators in the future. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video of the most annoying operator in Rainbow Six history. If you did, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, it'll be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you'll all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.